Hello, Clint.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. How about you?
I'm doing a little better.
Okay, do you see the screen?
I do.
All right, so where are we at with narrowing your focus?
Well, I found let's see.
Yes?
I found a couple of articles that I was looking at that I think that I thought might be helpful. And one of them, although a little, it's an older article, so I was gonna start following off of that one to work mine down. But
Okay.
it had for further the further here it is. Future studies could examine additional perspectives through both interviews and focus groups, including coaching staffs, student services employees, compliance officers, and athletic administrators.
Okay, so
And
what are we going to do?
this one has um this one has to do with the penalties off the field, exploring social media policies for student athletes at universities.
Okay, so what are you going to do? I'm narrow your focus of your topic. You've got one, two, three, four, five topics here in this slide.
Hmm.
You only get to do one, or else you'll never get done and I will die.
Right. Um, I, I'm leaning towards what would be, I guess, the third one, determining if student athletes receive instructions on the use of social media from school stakeholders like coaches, parents, and high school administrators.
Okay, so what's the problem?
The
Why? What is happening when this is not going on? That's the bad thing that happens.
um, well, I read that and I keep going into the different issues that could occur with student enrollment, student academic, um, the student athletes academic concerns.
What are the concerns?
Um, one that the student athlete would end up being removed from school, which would could harm their
Why?
future. For
You have a population of 1,200 people in
uh-huh,
a typical high school today.
uh-huh,
I would guess that of that, 1,200 people are on some kind of social media platform.
uh-huh.
What's the problem with athletes?
Um, the student athletes uh, typically they would have a bigger impact because of on the school itself because of their uh, their names are in the paper. It becomes a bigger issue if they're student athletes. because of the name of the schools attached to those students a little more than a non-student athlete.
Why?
Because they're associated with the athletic program, which because they're there's more coverage and of those student athletes than they are of non-student athletes, because they're out in the um, broader society and media coverage of those student athletes than non-student athlete.
Okay, I think you are making a very large assumption.
Okay.
So you're basically stating that any kind of post by a student athlete on social media could result in a negative impact against the school. As opposed to any other student that makes negative comments about their school.
Yeah, I can see how that would be that could be an issue.
Now, what might get you there is if you could find literature
Mm-hmm.
that has studied this group before, relating to a negative issue, which resulted in something happening.
So this article that I found here, penalties off the field, exploring social media policies for student athletes at universities. This one
Okay,
here is
that's universities.
right.
Universities may have different policies for students than a high school does.
Okay.
So, what's a negative thing that could happen to Chaparral High School because a student athlete wrote something negative?
Well, besides negative media attention, they can be fined,
Okay,
or the
negative media attention. Who's picking this information up? You think that the newspaper is monitoring this?
the well, I think the local media would be monitoring, because they look for news stories in the local issues, local areas. And once the local news media starts to present that information, it could have a broader effect if it is picked up by a larger news agencies, and hence when a story ends up going viral, in our current terms, and it could become a national.
Like what? I mean, I can't even think of anything right now that's gone on. What's happened with this that brings it to the national level?
um so there's been stories of hazing in at different athletic programs that have ended up getting national attention, and have there's one here at a private school in California at Mater Dei High School about hazing, which ended up that resulted in the termination of the head coach, and the school ended up declining an invitation to play a game at SoFi Stadium, a rivalry game at SoFi Stadium that would have brought in um, monies to the school for participating in that event.
So this has
And
to
it
do
was
with a
Senator.
particular type of issue, hazing. How did this
Yeah,
hazing become known?
the victim of the hazing filed a lawsuit
Uh-huh.
against the school, the coach, and the athletic.
Okay.
I think the archdiocese.
So align it to social media.
Oh, sorry. It was it was posted on social media. The incident that occurred was posted on social media,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what started the to broaden its um attention.
Do we have any other examples that are in literature?
Um, so this one has to do with a student and athlete discussed a tweet he sent shortly after a game that referenced his displeasure in his playing time and transferring from the school. He notes being called in by the coaches, and through that it said that message boards will take the kind of stuff and just run with it. So my coaches basically just said I didn't need to give people an inside view of what happens on our team. What happens on the team stays on the team, kind of thing, a family type thing. And that was immature on my part to say that when I hadn't even to say that even when I haven't really talked to the coaches or learned a lesson there. So this article had to do with training versus monitoring, a qualitative examination of athletic departments practices regarding student athletes and Twitter.
Okay. Are there policies at high school level regarding the use of social media by students?
There is a uh, this article by the National Federation of High Schools, dated in 2014. It says administrators should develop a plan for use of social media. And this one talks issues surrounding social media have school officials running for cover as high school students around the country have made it the conversational norm. Face-to-face conversations are infrequent and phone conversations are almost non-existent. And it talks about social medias. The coaches can collect rosters with social media handles for all student and athletes. So this is the National High School Federation saying that schools schools bring in experts, perhaps someone from law enforcement or the Department of Justice, to discuss the legal issues associated with bullying and how rampant it is through social media. These programs stress that most people don't mean a great deal of harm by what they pose, but there have been numerous instances of a suicide stemming from social media bullying. These stories have become more and more prevalent, which raises the question: is the social media warning program effective?
Okay, that sounds like it is a suggestion, right?
Yes.
It sounds like, gee, we're having these social media issues going on, and perhaps it's time for high schools to consider establishing policies.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happened since 2014?
That's where I'm still researching that to try to get it down to more specifically for the study.
Okay.
But that's where I was going with it. And then there were two instances. They weren't necessarily associated with the student athletes. I don't I can't say with 100% certainty that they dealt with athletes, student athletes, but there have been two suicides that have occurred from students that were being bullied through social media, and so that I just need to find if they had anything to do with the student athletes specifically.
Okay. Yeah. Now remember, these have got to be studies, empirical
Yes.
studies,
Hmm.
and not articles or opinion pieces. I call articles opinion pieces because they're just somebody writing about some topic they feel passionate about, but they are not empirical studies.
Right.
So how much time have you spent looking at this?
In the last week, I've spent about 15 to 20, 15 to 20 hours,
Okay.
and I found one that was more in line with um where I was going with it, but it was specifically for in Pennsylvania, a school district in Pennsylvania, and this
Mm-hmm.
was uh, but this was for a degree as a doctor of philosophy in sports management, and it has to do with interscholastic administrators' perception of social media policies for student athletes, and this was in 2020.
Mm. So it sounds like that has been recently studied.
Hmm.
Okay. One, you can't use a dissertation to support your study.
Right.
Okay. Two, you could look at that dissertation and see what those authors are talking about.
Yes.
Three, you might look at that dissertation's future research and then research down those pathways.
That was my next goal.
Okay. Okay. Well, I would just say keep working on your literature
Yes.
on this. And I see that you canceled your 960 class.
Okay.
Don't say okay. I got a note that that class was canceled.
Oh, if it was canceled, it was canceled. I didn't know that that was canceled.
Okay, you might want to check with your
Student services.
SSC
Hmm.
because that is the only, when I look at my calendar, that was to start the 9th. So it looks like you might have just pushed it off to the 16th.
Okay.
Okay, so
Again, I haven't talked to my student services counselor, and I didn't know that I was aware of that.
okay, so when we look at 960, that's draft of chapter 2 or chapter 3.
Hmm.
So between now and your next class, we need to see, I would say, at least 30 pieces of literature
Okay.
that are going to support your study. Because if you go into chapter 2,
Okay.
now you can choose to go into chapter 3, but again, you're going to have a defined business problem in order to complete chapter 3.
Mm-hmm.
So keep working at this
Okay.
and, do your what do we know about students and social media? What do
Mm-hmm.
we know about student athletes and social media? What do we know more about student athletes and social media? That leads us to what we do not yet know regarding athletes and social media that requires further study.
Understood.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And then I did you sent me the matrix,
Yes.
and you hadn't sent it because you had put in there you weren't sure if you had sent it to me before.
Mm-hmm.
You had, that was the
Okay.
this one that I received the other day was the first one that I received.
Okay. Okay, good.
So I'll start using that to sort out my articles and stuff.
Right. How many articles do you have so far?
Well, I want to say right around 100.
Okay, so I would go through that 100 and find the ones that deal specifically in this arena.
Yes.
So marketing tools for sports or organizations, set those aside. Social media campaigns, set that aside.
Okay.
Anything about the athlete's well-being, you might want to keep those around just to see if that has to do with issues surrounding social media. So you would want to not use the stuff that you've got in the first paragraph of the background to your problem.
Okay.
So focus more on student athletes, use of social media, and what is the bad thing that's happening.
Okay.
If it's that the school receives a negative impact and that does something to the school as a result, maybe lowers enrollment, maybe what you said, it could result in penalties against the team or against the athletic program. I would just say the athletic program.
Okay.
Those are bad things that happen.
Right.
And then what is it that we need further research of? One, it could be, are there school policies even in place regarding student athletes' use of social media? If there are no policies out there, then the question might be, should there be policies in place
Okay.
regarding athletes' use of social media and the influence that athletic program coaches provide? Now, I don't believe that there's any way that you're going to be able to gather, that one author that says, yeah, we want to gather all the social media accounts of these students.
Right.
because I'm not a parent, but I can tell you a lot of students or a lot of youth have multiple accounts.
Right.
They have the account that their parents see
Yeah.
or their mentor sees, and then they
Right.
have their other account.
Yeah.
The other thing is there are lots of social media platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So how can there be is there a policy that has some type of blanket enforcement over all social media platforms? So you may have to create what we would call probably, let's see, what did you have in here? This may actually be a case study
Okay.
on those schools that have created a social media policy for their student athletes. And then you would talk to those school administrators, coaches, stakeholders, no parents, because parents really aren't a stakeholder in policy,
Right.
and say, why did you create this policy? How did you create this policy? What was your goal of the policy? And then what have been the results of this policy? And then you would talk to the schools to get school administration to get their perception.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would also talk to perhaps coaches of those schools and student athletes of those schools to get their perspective on how these policies are rolling out, if they're effective or not.
Okay.
Now, your problem with this is you're going to be dealing with people under the age of 21. So you may need to think about, is it enough to just talk to these coaches and administrators of student athlete programs about how they are carrying out their work?
Yeah.
Even though
Yeah.
it would be really good to hear from those students
Right.
as to how they perceive that training, if it's effective or not,
Mm-hmm.
if the policy is even worth it or not. But you could, but you have more IRB issues to deal with.
Right. And we don't want any more IRB issues.
Well, it would just be, if that was a path you were going down,
Uh-huh.
the IRB would have to come in and guide us as to how it
Okay.
would be conducted safely. It has a much
Understood.
higher risk,
Yes.
which would create probably IRB monitoring of your study.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So if you only wanted to see what the perceptions of these athletic directors or program directors or coaches,
Uh-huh.
what their perceptions of as to the implementation of social media policies for student athletes, then that's all you would do. You would talk to the administration on the how, the why,
Right.
the what, and then you would talk to coaches as to, well, this was the goal. Talk to me about what your understanding of the goal was and whether or not you feel it's been successful.
Okay.
Okie dokie.
Yes, ma'am.
You have a very interesting topic. It's my only concern is, will you have enough literature to support it?
Understood. Yeah.
You might, if we go down the role of development of organizational policies and practices.
Okay.
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 All right, sir. Anything for me?
No, I appreciate your guidance in that because starting off, you come from way over here and to try to get it narrowed down and to get it focused into one specific issue that it's been really helpful for with your guidance.
Good, good. Well, I remember going through my journey, I wanted to talk about fraud in nonprofit organizations, examining fraud or exploring fraud in nonprofit organizations. And my mentor at the time said, that's a great idea, but it's a mile wide and an inch deep.
Yeah.
So you need to narrow that focus to a laser point so that you have a narrow focus but deep literature.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. I hope your spouse is good.
Yeah, she'll have to make some follow-up appointments, but she's feeling better with the information she received last night, so that's helpful. But there's some follow-ups that she's gonna have to do now.
Okay.